So I'm sure by now most of you have already heard about the announcements regarding the Juno mission to Jupiter on the 4th. That came out saying that it had finally, I believed, entered into the gravitational field of the planet Jupiter. And so the news media started releasing all sorts of different stories about it. And I gotta say, I know there's already plenty of videos about it and debunking it. A lot of interesting ways you can come at this, but I find it fascinating just because it's, now that I've been in this sort of new paradigm, if you will, with this new perspective on, just with enclosed cosmology and space and all these ideas, it is interesting to see these new things roll out. And in some ways it's not new. Obviously it launched in 2011. But now they're getting ready to reveal whatever they're going to reveal, when the Juno spacecraft finally supposedly gets close enough and starts taking pictures, but then apparently it's not even really there to take pictures. That has a camera on board, but it's mostly just taking all these measurements of measures gravity and radiation and spectroscopy and there's a number of different things that aren't actual digital photographs, but I'm sure they'll convert everything into some kind of imagery or whatever. But there's a lot of fascinating little things to kind of pick apart. But for me, it's been weird because I've found myself kind of mostly just concentrating on the simple kind of the irony of just the names of everything, and how just every time it always comes, you get into all this this space propaganda, and we can look at it on the surface as just space propaganda, but then of course when it's the planet Jupiter and then the spacecraft Juno, it always pushes you back into the mythological. And just been going back and reading about Jupiter in mythology and Juno, and how those were two figures who were part of the Roman, they're both names of Roman gods, obviously, and part of the Capitoline triumvirate. And so there's definitely a connection between those two figures in a mythological sense and the occult sense. And I'm sure the skeptics would just say, well, obviously they knew that Juno was going to Jupiter, so they just picked a name out of mythology that correlated to Jupiter. And that's the thing. There's always there's always those kind of surface level excuses. But to me, it's just fascinating because it continues to push me to wonder. Like, obviously it's space propaganda, and pushing the whole paradigm of heliocentricity and everything, but it's hard to not look at this stuff more and more and just wonder about what is going on the more esoteric level, and what are they really perhaps trying to do in terms of programming or coded. I mean, if this is all just fake, it's more than just propaganda, and it's we're using all these names and all these terms, and it definitely feels like there's more of a ritual to it all, in terms of it's like a subconscious invocation, or something. All these people talking about Juno and talking about Jupiter, and I've talked about this before in earlier videos, but just this whole idea of there being that everything is a code for something else. And when you think about planets being named after gods, or which are really fallen angels, and but the idea that a planet also represents a realm of that god, right? And so if we're talking about spiritual realms and stuff, and Gons of Face Like the Sun just put out a very interesting video on the whole Juno Jupiter thing, and he even mentions about how in the Kabbalah that Jupiter is one of the realms. It's like a realm of hell, basically. So it's the Kabbalistic system definitely kind of follows that idea of entities and realms and the planets all being sort of intertwined. But anyways, another thing that kind of popped up in this whole slew of news articles, with this Jupiter Juno news, has been stuff that has come out over the past few years from Hubble regarding Jupiter. Is this issue of the auroras on Jupiter that, and this is really interesting to me too, because once again, when you look into the mythological origins of words and names and things, the Aurora itself is the name of a god, the god of the dawn. And so again, just like everything else in mythology, these are all just archetypes for Lucifer. And it's just really interesting to kind of ponder the connections between, what they're kind of hinting at using materialistic, pseudoscientific, CGI garbage, but implanting all kinds of things into the minds of the public, into our subconsciouses, through all this stuff. And it's interesting because I found this clip when I was looking for stuff on Jupiter and the auroras and everything. I did find this clip from this lady just recently putting this out, who she's absolutely she's coming from a total new age, esoteric, hermetic angle, which I would, of course, totally not agree with, but I'm just would include this just to demonstrate how people really can take all these these heliocentric sort of NASA things being put out by all these things being put out by NASA and interpret them through a more typical Gnostic, a very occult and astrological sense. So just listen to this.
Our solar system become more energized, and they are now seeing auroras sparking up on Jupiter's north pole. Now, I want to thank Alan for bringing my attention to this, because it is very significant when we do start seeing the planets within our solar system exhibiting this type of behavior. Now, the most significant comment in this article is from Jonathan Nichols, who is the principal investigator of the study. And he goes on to say that these auroras are very dramatic and among the most active I have ever seen. Now, when we understand the esoteric knowledge, and we know that Jupiter is equated to Zeus, and Zeus is the symbol of our creator, we know that when we are seeing this type of behavior on this planet, that it is something that we should actually be paying attention to. Because when we apply the principles of hermetics and the principle of correspondence, we know as above, so below, as below, so above. Now, this is basically showing us that everything in the universe is a macrocosm and a microcosm. And so we are fractals of the macrocosm within our universe. And when we see this type of activity happening on the planets within our solar system, then we can actually understand that this can be translated to the human experience. And this is where we have to look at the information left to us by the ancients, because they were showing this in the symbolism. Because if we can understand that the planets, including our own planet Earth, can display these auroras and halos, then we can transfer that to the human form when we use the principle of correspondence. And this is why we do see the symbolism of the halos and auroras around the divine beings within the human species, because at certain times of the cycle, when we are more energized, when the light returns, then these divine beings amongst our human species are known for who they are. They are seen for their differences between the divine and mortal humans. This is also where the symbolism of the crown actually originates, because the original kings and queens were divine. And as we move down the cycle into the Iron Age, then we forget where these symbols originate, and then it's only those who take power that then use these symbols to crown themselves. But when we're in a more energetic part of the cycle, then these are the natural crowns that are bestowed upon the divine by the Creator, because when the light returns, then the divine element within mankind is energized and revealed, and we can see this left to us in the information from the ancients. And it's also...
And then, of course, you have the whole, when you're thinking about all this stuff, thinking about propaganda and Jupiter and everything, of course, just a couple of years ago, most people are familiar with the movie by the Wachowskis, Jupiter Ascending, which I never actually went and saw because it just looked that bad. But there's been stuff put out on that as well, and all the occult symbolism and the references in there, and it's pretty interesting too. Just kind of coincidental that would be put out in 2015, in between the launch of the Juno spacecraft and supposedly, this event, and who knows if there'll be anything major coming out of it. But it does seem to further tie into this whole idea of not just the evolution of the solar system, but then the idea of the possibilities of life, because they're talking about finding water, underneath the gaseous atmosphere of Jupiter. But so if anyone, it's just really interesting to think about, why are they faking auroras, not just on Jupiter, but even, Saturn and Venus supposedly have their own auroras, which, makes me wonder about is the idea of a dawn, a new dawn for these different deities or different realms, and, does it signify something, whenever they supposedly come out with a new revelation like this? Is there some sort of esoteric meaning behind it? Or also, too, with the auroras, it's interesting because it kind of makes you, it kind of seems to suggest the idea of a crowning or a coronation or something, and maybe that's just me, I don't know. But yeah, I've just been chewing on this for a few days, and I just, I don't have anything majorly, groundbreaking to reveal, but just kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit and get people's input and see what other people have found on it as well. Just because it's, now that I've been in this sort of new paradigm, if you will, with this new perspective on, just with enclosed cosmology and space and all these ideas, it is interesting to see these new things roll out. And in some ways, it's not new. So I'm sure releasing all sorts of different stories about it. And I gotta say, I know there's already plenty of videos about it and debunking it. A lot of interesting ways you can come at this, but I find it fascinating. By now, most of you have already heard about the announcements regarding the Juno mission to Jupiter on the 4th. That came out saying that it had finally, I believed, entered into the gravitational field of the planet Jupiter. And so the news media started